Welcome to Cuppa with a Doula. I'm your host, Alicia. I'm an exercise physiologist by trade. I'm also a doula and I'm a mum to two. I created this podcast over a year ago now to allow mums to have a platform to safely share their birth and parenting journey, regardless of where they birth, whether it's a hospital birth, it's a planned C-section, whether they birthed at home, and whether they had a midwife present or not. It's all on Cuppa with a Doula. And every month, I also chat with an expert in the field of pregnancy, birth, and parenting in the aim to be able to share expert knowledge and raise awareness about important topics. So if you've been enjoying the podcast, please consider subscribing either on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast from. I'm also on YouTube as well, so you can watch the interviews if you'd like. And if you wouldn't mind, please leave a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. It really helps the algorithm to find me, to then share what I do so that more mums, more parents to be can find me. So with this in mind, I'll leave you with the episode now. If you want to share your story, head over to the show notes. There's a link there and you can fill out the form and I'll get in touch with you to record your incredible birth and parenting journey. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Kelly. Kelly is really funny. We had a lot of fun recording this episode actually. And she takes us through her very different two birth stories for her two daughters. Kelly is a planner. When she and her husband were thinking about getting pregnant, she was doing her research, and because of the friend circle she was in and also the fact that her mum had C-sections birth as well, Kelly went with a private obstetrician for her first birth. And she takes us through how she interviewed a few obstetricians, and even though she was going through an obstetric model of care, she still wanted to have a hands-off approach and a physiological birth, which you will see how Kelly was able to achieve this. She was very determined, but this experience, when she reflected on it, she thought that for her second daughter, it wasn't exactly what she wanted to do. So she started diving a little bit more into birth options and models of care. And she landed on having a home birth. So for her second daughter, she was able to have a home birth, have her midwife come to her home, involve her firstborn into this pregnancy and the birth. And you will hear the incredible birth story of Kelly and how she brought her daughter into the world at home, undisturbed, and with her firstborn present at the birth too. If you want to see pictures of Kelly's birth, she is actually on Instagram at Naturally Kelly. She shares a lot about motherhood. It's funny, it's real, and it's raw, and that's everything I like. So give her a follow actually, and she's preparing a very concise guide for pregnant mums as well. So you definitely want to get your hands on it. I've had the pleasure of reading it firsthand, and it is everything that I wish I had when I was first pregnant. So I'll leave you with this episode now. I hope you enjoy it. Here is the story with Kelly. Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No problems. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, amazing. Do you want to start by introducing yourself? So telling the listeners your name, where you're living, and who is in your family.
Yeah, so I am Kelly. I live in Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. I have two beautiful little girls who are age, what are they, 3.5 and 1.5 now. And live with my husband as well. So we're a little family of 4 and enjoying being a little family unit.
Oh, amazing. Wow. Oh, that's great. And so a question I ask all my guests before we dive into their stories is, did you always want to be a mum?
Yes. Yes, it has always been, I guess, an aspiration, a goal. Has always been something that felt right and what I wanted. And I've very fortunate to have experienced a whole lot of what the world has to offer before becoming a mum as well.
Nice. And so when you met your husband, was he also on the same page? Did he also want to be a dad?
Yeah, yeah. So we actually met when we were 16. Um, yeah, so we were friends to begin with and then started dating at 18.
Uh-huh.
We were working together at McDonald's, first lovely first job.
Yes.
Um, but I owe it a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, we dated for a long time and then got married and had obviously had that conversation
Yeah.
and what our goals were to achieve before having kids. And
Yeah.
we were able to do that. So the time kind of came around and we were like, hey, we're ready to do this. Let's enter the adventure of parenting.
Wow. So what goals, if you don't mind me asking, what goals
Yeah.
did you do before you became a parent?
Yeah, so well we bought a house when what I was 22 and he was 21. So yeah, we've worked forever, bought a house, and then we were deciding whether we wanted to have kids young or
Yeah.
go and travel and do before kids so
Yeah.
that we could then have kids and then go and travel and do
Yeah.
with them. So we bought the house, then we got married, and then we traveled to the UK and lived in London for 2 years on a working holiday visa.
Wow.
We weren't ready to come home at the end of that, so we then applied for a 2-year working visa in Canada and lived in Vancouver for 2 years. At the end of that, we weren't really ready to come home. We tried to get an additional year in Vancouver because we just loved it there so much, but the visa rules changed and we were too
Oh.
late. So, because it used to be you could just keep applying
Mm-hmm.
for visas over and over, but not for us. So we came back to Australia at the end of 2018,
Uh-huh.
and then 2020 we had our first little one.
What a life.
Yeah,
Wow. Do you know that's incredible to just have lived in other countries and have
yeah,
experienced a different culture, right? Because, I mean, obviously it's an English speaking country, so you're not learning a new language,
yeah,
but the culture is so different. It's nothing like Australia in
yeah,
both, UK and Canada.
yeah.
Did you have two Canadian winters?
We did. Yes,
Oh,
yes,
how
yes,
did you
yes, we did.
survive?
I
That would
don't
have been,
know.
that would have been so
Because
cold.
when we got back to Brisbane and it got down to like 20 degrees, I'm like in a hoodie and a jumper. I took a photo of myself and I'm like, I don't know how I survived one in the UK or
Yeah.
in Canada. At least in Vancouver, like you get the warmth of summer as well. But in
Mm-hmm.
London, like London summer is Brisbane winter.
Oh, that's amazing. You just do it, right? And then when
Yeah,
you get back to your, to the country, you get used to their climate, their temperature
yeah.
so much that yeah, then you're cold and it's like 20 degrees,
Yeah, I'm
right? I
like,
mean
how did I
Queensland
survive
winter.
this?
How cold would it be in winter in Vancouver?
So it's not too bad. Like, I think the coldest we had was like negative 14, maybe. But we had like our first winter there was like a 1 in 20 year snow, like not storm, but like snow covering. So it was covering downtown Vancouver, and Vancouver do not do snow well. So they were not prepared. Like the city ran out of salt. The sidewalks were like
No
ice. We
way.
were watching buses like trying to get up a hill. And because they're run on electric, so they're like
Yeah.
attached to the electric wires and they like lose connection there and then they'd start sliding backwards. And my husband, Jaden, and I are just like, um, is this normal? Like, and then the next winter we were like that was fun because we got the novelty of snow and we weren't
Yeah.
working at the time, so we had nowhere to be. The next winter we were both working and we're like, yeah, nah, let's not do that again. So we didn't. It was only 1 year, thank heavens.
Wow, that's crazy. I've heard that people that live in Canada, when they ask you, how long you've been living there, they don't say, "Oh, how long have you been living there?" They say, "How many Canadian winters have you had?" And I thought that was epic because
That is
it's just, and does it really go for like a long time? Like, is it about like 6 months of like not necessarily snow, but just like
cold.
cold, like
Yeah,
really cold?
yeah, yeah. Like maybe not 6. Yeah, maybe. I don't really remember.
Yeah,
Um, we had fun because it's so
yeah,
novel. Like we're from Brisbane.
yeah,
It's not cold, not cold
yeah,
here ever. So we really enjoyed like having 4 seasons, not just winter and summer.
yeah.
And because we lived in Vancouver, there's 3 mountains that you can go and ski on that
Oh.
are within like less than an hour drive. So we would make the most of the snow and winter and go
Yeah.
up and like ski and snowboard and just like really kind of enjoy the snow.
That's amazing. And you've done
Yeah.
all of that before you had kids. That's probably
Yep.
the best time. I
Yeah.
mean, you can obviously do it with kids, just
Oh,
putting it out there.
100%. Yeah.
But yeah. Oh. And I mean, snowsuits for kids are just so
So
cute,
cute.
right? Like
They're
just
little
like a little
starfish.
bit. Yeah, I love it. So 2020 is the year you had your first daughter.
Yes.
What was it like? Because obviously that was, such a different year for all of us out there.
Yes. So yeah, so 2020, that was so it was May 1st, 2020,
Yeah.
that she was born. And so
Wow.
peak lockdown,
Yes.
peak COVID, and it was still really unknown. Like, I feel
Wow.
like there was a lot of fear, which now I don't feel so much, but
Yeah.
but there was a lot. And so I was working full time, and at February 2020, I think it was the end of February, I decided I'm not going into work anymore.
Hmm.
I will just work full time from home. And then it was like 3 weeks later, our work shut down. And I think everywhere kind of shut down.
Mm.
And there was a scramble to get everyone able to work from home. But at that point, I had decided that I was just going to work up until I went into labor, because I was like, well, why waste my maternity leave? I'm in lockdown. I can't leave the house anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I worked up until going into labor in
Oh,
in a team meeting. Yeah.
no way. Oh,
I
we're going to
didn't.
get back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. Yeah.
That's epic. So you conceived in 2019, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that was planned?
Yes.
Wow.
I am just so my job is an executive assistant. I am a planner.
Yes. Hmm.
Um, I knew that one, I was not going to be pregnant, heavily pregnant over summer.
Uh-huh.
I was like,
Good.
it's not happening. I don't want it. I'm absolutely not. And so with our first, I was very kind of nervous that we weren't going to be able to conceive easily. And
Hmm.
I'm not really
Hmm.
sure what kind of put that in my mind, but that's the mindset I
Yeah.
had. It was going to be difficult. It was going to take forever. No. First go. We were pregnant. um, so
Lovely.
I was like, well, okay, so that fear is gone. Yeah, so I think like I knew something was different in my body. I think I was about 3 weeks pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I was like, said to my husband, I'm like, we were up for the gym,
Hmm.
and so we were up at like 4:30 in the morning, to go to the gym, because we're crazy. Like, we
Mm.
didn't have kids. Why are we getting up so early? At 4:30, and I'm like, you know what? My boobs feel different. Um, and I feel a little bit sick. Let's just do a pregnancy test before the gym. And we
Hmm.
did it, and it came back positive. And I was
Oh.
like, get out of town. Like, no freaking way. We're not actually ready. Like, we were like, no, it's not going to happen, like, first up.
Yeah.
We weren't ready. We were like, oh, yeah, it'll be like 6 months and then it'll
Mm.
happen.
Mm.
Straight up, ready. Let's do it. So,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah,
So
it was
that's
pretty cool.
almost a shock, right? Because
It
if
was.
you're thinking, well, it might take, which for some people it does, like, not everyone conceives on the first go,
Yeah.
but it's still normal to take like I think the average is like 10 to 12 months, which
Yeah.
is like, it seems like forever when you're trying to conceive. And
Yeah.
that's normal.
And
Like,
that's what we were expecting because
yeah.
I had been on the pill for since I was like 18, from
Hmm.
say from 18 to 26,
Hmm.
27, something like that. And then I went off the pill when we moved to Canada because it was going to cost me like 150 to $200 just to go to the GP to get a
Oh,
prescription. So I was like, oh,
yeah.
we're done. We just need to be really careful now.
Yeah.
Um, and that's when I kind of started looking into getting to know my body
Hmm.
and ovulation and the cycles and all that. I wasn't really into it too closely at that point. But then when we decided we were going to become pregnant, I started doing more research, learning,
Hmm.
and yeah, learnt and kind of know when things are going to happen now. But yeah, so we were in shock that it happened straight away. We were like, oh yeah, it'll be a while, and then yeah, it just we were pregnant, and we were like, cool, let's run with that.
I
Um,
love it.
yeah, because if I had thought about now in hindsight, I would have planned so that she was a like July-ish baby because that works better for the school year. But, but
I
that was
love
something that I didn't know at that time.
it. We'll get back to when your second
Yeah,
daughter was born to see if you put that into place
yeah,
then. Um, but yeah, it's very interesting that, well, circumstances made you come off the pill because, well, it wasn't very practical, financially and so on.
yeah.
And and then yeah, you learned about your body, so you know
Mm,
your signs of ovulations, and
yeah.
oh, I feel this, or I, my mood changes, or
Mm,
whatever it is. And so therefore, for what, 2 or 3 years, you were able to not conceive when
yeah,
because you didn't want to, and then
yeah,
and then yeah, first go,
yeah,
which good on you.
yeah,
But yeah, as I said, that would have been it's I feel like it's equally a shock when it happens first go compared to when you've been waiting for 10 months and then it
yeah,
happens, right?
yeah,
And at this point you're like, oh, it's never happening. And then you're like, oh,
yeah,
pregnant.
yeah,
Wow. Like it's not it's hard to explain, like, when you like first go, you go, nah,
yeah,
as if you'd
yeah,
get pregnant first go. But yeah, you do.
yeah,
So you're a planner. So you love your your to-do list. I'm sure you've got plenty of to-do lists. I'm
yep.
generalizing here, sorry about
Yeah,
that.
no, that's okay.
um what did you know about pregnancy? Had you done research around, models of care and what to do when you find out you're pregnant and so on?
So no. um because I wasn't expecting it to happen so quickly.
That's true.
I had gone to our GP
Yeah.
and gotten some information and spoken to her about my concerns and stuff, and she was like, she's lovely, and she's always like, darling, you have nothing to worry about. You're young, you're healthy,
Yep.
it's fine. So when I got pregnant, I straight away was like, okay, let's go get a blood test before we get too excited and like
Hmm.
get that confirmed and a
Hmm.
bit more
Hmm.
solid. And then, yeah, so I didn't really know about the different models of care or anything. I just kind of thought you
Yeah.
get an OB and you go to hospital and have a baby. So
Yes.
that's all I really knew for baby number one. Baby number
Hmm.
two, definitely a lot more educated and able to make a few more informed decisions, which was cool.
And
Yeah.
so it's interesting that you mentioned, like you didn't know about, models of care, which is
Mm,
like the majority of pregnant moms, like
yeah.
including myself. But you went with an OB, which is obviously not I guess, common pathway in Australia because you
Yeah.
need to have private health, which not everyone's got it,
Yeah.
obviously. So did your GP tell you about OB, or had you maybe had private health insurance, so hence
Yeah.
the OB pathway?
Yeah, so I have private health insurance. I also think that that's the way mum had her care. So
Uh-huh.
it probably was like, oh, well, this is just the
Yeah.
way it goes. I also had a few friends who had babies,
Yeah.
and they had taken that road of
Yeah,
care. So
makes sense.
I went with that.
Yeah.
I did get some recommendations from my GP because she knew what I kind of wanted. So she was able to recommend a few people in the area. And then I obviously got word of mouth from my friends, and I kind of interviewed a few OBs
Yeah.
before and like stalked their websites and stuff
Yeah.
just to see
Good.
what their vibe was like before I landed on the OB that I went with.
That's exactly how it should be. If you're going to pick an OB and you're going to pay for him or her, you definitely want to know who you're getting, and you definitely want to do your research and just
Yeah.
check who they are, because as you said, there's a vibe there. You
Mm.
definitely want to know that they're on the same page as you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're not like, you're not going to like headbutt in labor, basically.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I wanted somebody who was going to be really supportive of a
Hmm.
hands-off approach,
Uh-huh.
and let me do things the way I wanted to do them. And then
Good.
they were basically there to act if
Yeah.
things went wrong.
Good, good. So
Yeah.
you were educated in that you knew that you didn't want, you didn't
Yeah.
want the OB to be actively, like, oh,
Yeah.
clock, forceps,
Yeah.
episiotomy and so on.
Yeah.
So that's educated.
Yes. Yeah. So I think I knew about like that
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was mostly from one or two friends who had their first and then second, and had them in a different, like with different OBs and different
Yeah.
environments, and like just
Uh-huh.
their experience there. But yeah, so I did know a bit, but I didn't know about about the options for how to be cared for. I just knew that I got to, like I don't even know that I knew that I could be kind of like dictate what I wanted. It was more, "Oh, this is what I want, so
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
it."
Yeah. And so what was the care like with your OB? So obviously you saw her for all your appointments.
Yeah.
What was she? So she was supportive of, an approach where she would just watch and act if needed, but otherwise she would just stand back?
Yeah, so I was very open with her from the beginning of what I wanted. She was actually the one who suggested to me doing a hypnobirthing course. I'm going back, sorry, to all the appointments. I would come in with a notebook with a list of questions just to ask,
Amazing.
because I would always forget like what to ask, like what can I
Yeah.
do exercise wise? What should I be eating? Like was that, is this normal? Is that blah 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 kind of thing. And she was like always very happy to answer my questions. She never made me feel like I was asking a silly question, which was important. And because like it's my first time, I don't know
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
normal, what is not, what should I be feeling.
Mm.
So yeah, she was really great at that. She had a midwife as well, that worked with her. Unfortunately, she was pregnant. Well, not unfortunately, good for her. Unfortunately for me, she was pregnant, so it was on maternity leave. I think I only met with her like twice,
Oh.
the midwife, but had all my appointments with my OB,
Yeah.
and then had lovely midwives at the hospital. I hadn't met them prior to going
Uh-huh.
into labor, but that like I was okay. Like I was okay with that. They
Yeah.
were lovely. Like they were just lovely, and I was able to tell them exactly what I wanted, and they kind of left me to it to
Wow.
do what needed to be done.
Oh, nice. And so for your, I guess birthing education, so did you do hypnobirthing in the end?
Yeah, so I was really hesitant about the cost of it. And that was something that we were like tossing up for ages. And then we were like,
Mm.
no, yeah, this is worth it. And I found somebody that I follow on Instagram, and she lives down on the Gold Coast. So that's like an hour
Yeah.
and a bit drive for us. And I was like, I like her vibe. Let's go make a weekend of it, go stay
Yeah.
down the coast. We'll do one of the classes and then come back. It's like 2 or 3 weekends later and do the
Yeah.
second, or a week later and do the second class. We
Mhm.
didn't end up getting to make a weekend of it. The first one, there was a massive car crash,
No
and we
way.
nearly didn't make it to the class, which is awesome. And then the
Oh
second one,
gosh.
the highway flooded. So
No
we actually had
way.
to, yeah, we had to reschedule. We were sitting on the highway, and I was driving because my husband had been out the night before, so he was not in a state to
Yeah.
drive.
Yeah.
At that point, he was having a nap. And I'm driving and I'm looking at the GPS and it's like, oh, cool. We're like 45 minutes off. Come around a corner. Oh, GPS has just changed to be we're an hour and 45 minutes off now. Okay, cool.
Wow.
Wake up. Um, what's going on? And at this point, so this was our rescheduled one as well, I think. No, it wasn't rescheduled one. This is the one where it was flooded. And I'm sitting there. I was probably like 28, 29 weeks pregnant at that point. And so I had a little bump. And I'm going, I really need to wee. Like, this is not good. We're in bumper to bumper. Like, you're not moving at all.
No.
And we were on the outside lane. And I'm like, so my husband, I'm like, we're going to need to swap seats so that he could jump lanes. So we'd switch seats on the highway. So we're not moving and not moving anytime soon, so that he could get over to the inside lane, take a fire lane to turn back. And we called the lady. We're like, we're not coming. Like, we've been sitting in traffic for an hour. The class has already started. Can we reschedule? And she's like, yeah, no problems. But I was like, oh my God, I'm not weeing on the side of the highway. That's not happening. So I'm like, get us back to the nearest service station. Yeah, so that was a bit of fun. We eventually got to the second class, had a lovely, like, it was the best experience. And I feel like it really empowered my husband. He got a lot out of it in regards to what he could advocate for me.
Yeah.
If I wasn't in a state to be able to talk for myself. He knew exactly what I wanted. And it was really good. I think I went into it thinking it was going to be a bit hippy dippy, like not like a bit of fluff. It was not at all. It was very informative, and I really enjoyed the changing your mind frame around contractions.
Yes.
And changing it as a surge, not a contraction. And the visualization, like when I think of contraction, I'm thinking like, ugh. And then when I was like thinking of a surge, I'm thinking of like waves. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like that just, I think that really helped. And like changing the mindset around like being scared of the pain, more being excited that that's what's going to help bring like this baby to me and like allow me to meet her. But yeah, so for me, it was very good for my mindset. And also learning like how the uterus works and how different it behaves when you have like when you're induced and given is it Syntocin or Pitocin? Yeah. And how differently it behaves, that it's not the same.
No.
And I feel like, I don't know if anyone had ever actually said that it was the same, but they like, I was like, now I know it's not.
No.
Now I know I don't want that. But yeah, and then for me, so all of that was really great for me. And then for my husband, like I think just having the knowledge, because I was all into like Googling and learning, like finding all the birthing Instagram accounts. Like that's just what I did with my evenings then, was just learn about birth. But for him, I think that was just a really good way for him to learn, get all the information at once, and then be able to walk away with a workbook that we were able to go over and over again together. Yeah, so hypnobirthing was 100% worth the investment.
Nice. And it's so funny the way it all began for you, because it's like, it's almost like it's showing you that things, in labor and in birth can take a different pathway. And so that was the introduction to birthing. Things can go a different way to what you had scheduled. So that was funny. But you're right in saying that hypnobirthing, you're not, everything you've said, I've heard it before, and it's like, it does sound like, oh, I'm going to be hypnotized and woohoo. It's a bit like, it's a bit like that. And it's nothing to do with that at all. A lot of it, as you said, is around education, and it's about the more knowledge you have, the more power you have in that you can make informed decisions. You can make decisions where you know the pros and you know the cons. So therefore you can, when something happens in your labor, you can go, oh, that's right, we spoke about this. This is that. Oh, do I want to, have an induction or have an augmentation or whatever? Yes, no. And the thing with hypnobirthing that is so amazing is that it gives you strategies. So, as you said, talking about reframing, the whole reframing, like just the language it can sound really trivial, like, oh, okay, I'm just going to, instead of saying contraction, I'm going to say surges. But it actually, like, in terms of what it means for you, and if you practice it over and over, like, it's actually really, like, it's simple, but it's really good. It is such a great tool. It's like, yeah. And then when you go into labor and you experience your first surges, you're like, the wave.
Yeah.
And then you see that. And, like for me, when I was in labor, I was like, okay, it's a mind game. Like, I know it's all like, no, it's not all in the mind, but your mind plays an essential role in, the way you react during labor, obviously. So it's like, okay, it's a mind game. Okay, I can do it. Okay, yes. So that was a lot of what I did. But yeah, the strategies you get during hypnobirthing, some people use all of them. Some people just use one because that one strategy makes so much sense to them. And some people just use it here and there. And that's what it is. It's about giving you the tools, and then you decide what's going to work, what's not going to work, when you use it, and so on. And it's got a really good bonding effect with your partner as well, because, as you said, you're the one, diving into the Instagram, the post, the podcast, the YouTube and stuff. But usually partners don't really do that because, like, they're not giving birth. I mean, they're there for the birth, but it's just not the same. I feel like they don't have that desire to dive in as much because, well, they don't have a uterus, like they can't really relate to all of that, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
I also think, some of it is they might not necessarily know what their role is.
yeah,
And I actually think that was the biggest thing for my husband, is that he discovered what his role was in the delivery room, and through even before labor, like in pregnancy, he now knew what his role was. And what he would then go on to be able to do. And gave him a bit of clarity around that.
Yeah, and see, that's everything, because otherwise, like, your partner can feel really disconnected, maybe, like, kind of like, okay, well, my wife is in labor. And like, well, okay, what do I do? She's in pain. Okay, that sucks, like, what do I do? But yeah, no, it's really, really good for that. And it's, I think hypnobirthing is, like, fantastic for all these reasons. And, amazing. So you would have felt really prepared and equipped with knowledge then after you did that. And you already had the idea that you wanted to labor on your own term, no induction, no hands-on, unless, obviously something arose. But otherwise it's like, okay, don't touch me, I can labor. Good. So what was, the weeks leading up to labor like? What happened in those coming weeks?
So I had a really boring pregnancy. No, actually, no. With my first, I did have gestational diabetes. That was a bit of I wasn't expecting it. And I didn't really have any education around like what even that meant, or what it was, or what caused it. And so and this is the only thing that I didn't like in my whole experience with my OB, is the way I was informed that I had gestational diabetes. Was the receptionist called, so I was at work in the office, the receptionist called and was like, oh, so you are positive for GDM or whatever. Can you, she didn't say whatever, but she's like, yeah, you're positive for gestational diabetes. Can you come in and collect an information pack? We close at XYZ time today. I was like, okay, yeah, no problems. Like, no worries, thanks. Hung up. And I'm sitting there at my desk going, so does that mean I have gestational diabetes? Like, and then so I started to go into a panic, and I was like, oh my God, it's something I've done that has caused this. And so I ended up calling them back or emailing them or something, and was like, so just want to confirm, like, does this mean I have it? And they're like, yeah, you do. Come get the information pack. And at that point, I just burst into tears at my desk. And I was like, okay, I'm going home. So I had to go catch the train home from the city. in tears, pregnant. I'm like, well, this doesn't look weird at all. Uh, so called my husband like in tears, and he's going, oh my God. And I couldn't get the words out, and he's going, oh my God,
Oh.
something like terrible has happened. I'm like, oh no, it's not terrible. I'm just emotional and hormonal. So he came home as well, and we got the information pack, started reading through it, then had set up with a gestational or a diabetes educator, and they went through, and so I have hemochromatosis, and they were like, oh, well, yeah, if you have that, yeah, it'd be expected that you get gestational diabetes. Like, that's just really common. And I'm like, okay,
Oh.
well, no one told me this.
Mm.
So it's actually something that the OB didn't know either, that would be kind of expected. But yeah, so that, and I genuinely thought it was something like I'd been eating wrong or like doing something wrong. And then the educator was like, no. That's just the way your pancreas is reacting to the hormones. Like it's nothing to do with your health or
No.
anything that is in your control at all. And then so I was only just on the cusp of having reading to have gestational diabetes, and they let me know that they'd just increased the band in which you could fall into the category of having gestational diabetes. So I was able to manage it all with diet. I didn't really even change my diet all that much, other than like being more conscious of the carbs that I was consuming and making sure I got up and went for a walk after eating. Like that was really all that changed. I still was like, every now and then I would feel like, oh, I'm on my baby moon. I've just had a cupcake. Like when I would be sending off the readings, I'd put a note there being like, yep, this was a treat. Not sorry that it's high. It was a treat. I'm on my baby moon. Like I had ice cream. And like my OB was like, yeah, well, if it's not all the time, it's fine. Like,
yeah, no, that's
it's
good.
fine.
So
It's under
you've
control.
got hemochromatosis,
Yeah.
which, can you remind me what it is
Yes.
again?
So hemochromatosis is where your body holds on to too much iron.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and really fun that it has the same symptoms as being anemic. So,
No way!
in high school, I was really anemic. Like in year 12, I was probably burning out a little bit as well, trying to do too much, but I was really tired. Like I just could barely, maybe it was year 11, whatever. I could barely stay awake for an entire day. Like I would go have a nap in the sick bay and then keep doing school. Yeah, so I was really anemic, and then I discovered the hemochromatosis when I started a new job, and I was like, oh, I'm really tired. Oh, I must be low in iron. I'll take some iron tablets. No, didn't fix it. Oh, I mustn't be sleeping enough, so I'll go to bed earlier. Didn't fix it. Maybe I'm not exercising enough. I'll up my exercise. Didn't fix it. At that point, I was like, okay, let's go get a blood test. And I told them what was happening, and they're like, let's test you for this. And so it turned out my iron was like through the roof, and that's why I was so tired. And so that was something that we had to watch whilst I was pregnant as well, was my iron levels, because obviously if you're not bleeding each month, you are retaining that iron. I never had to like give blood or anything to reduce it, but I just managed it through diet again, making sure I was keeping those levels balanced, because obviously baby needs iron, but not too much.
Wow. See, that's really interesting because, as you said, if you're not bleeding through your menstruation, well, you're not losing any blood or you're not losing any iron, but then obviously baby is dipping into your reserves, but they're probably not dipping enough that if you've got too much, like they're helping you. So it's like, it's probably still too high.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So were you recommended to not have too many food that are high in iron then?
So no, I'm not a big red meat eater, but I like kept an eye on, that. I would have maybe less spinach and stuff because I liked having green smoothies, and like that saw a boost in my iron. And then I was taking a prenatal vitamin that specifically didn't have iron in it.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I managed it throughout, and still kind of do like, oh, every now and then if I'm at the doctor's for the kids, I'll be like, oh, can you write me a blood test? I haven't tested it in a while. Like, I just want to see where my levels are at so
Yeah.
that I can continue to manage. Like, I either need to up it or lower it, kind of thing.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
so, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is a genetic condition?
It is. So I haven't tested the girls.
Uh-huh.
I asked their pediatrician whether we
Mhm.
should, and they're like, look, if they're not at this stage, no, it's not
Yeah.
necessary. Like, they're not going
Mhm.
to be consuming enough that
Yeah,
it's
true.
going to be a problem. So probably later down the track, we
Yeah.
will test. So I've got two sisters, and neither of them have the gene. It's just me, lucky.
Wow. Cool. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I mean, at least if you know you've got hemochromatosis, so you know that if one of your girls shows, those signs,
exactly. We
well,
just get
you'll
tested straight away.
exactly. So
Yeah,
you'll just be acting on it straight away, going, "Oh,
yeah,
I think it might be a sign of. Let's test it." There you
yeah.
go. So your girl won't be going through this,
Guessing
oh, I'll
game.
try this and I'll try
Yeah,
that, and nothing works. Okay, that's really strange, So
yeah,
that's at least that's good, So
yeah.
yeah, wow, that's really interesting. Like that, like the general population, we're like, oh, you need to eat more iron, you need to like keep your levels up, and then for you,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, no, 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 don't keep your levels up,
Yeah.
bring it down.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So take us through the big day. What
Yeah.
happened on the big day?
Yeah. Well, so for my first, the big day went for a real long time.
Oh, damn. Right. So the
So,
big days.
yeah. So I think I started labor on, I wrote it down just here, on the 29th of April. So the
Good on you.
29th of April in the afternoon, I was in a team meeting at
Mm-hmm.
home in my office, and I was like, "Oh, gee, my back is sore." And
Right?
I was like, "Oh, why is it so sore? Like, this is unusual." I'd been on the ball all day. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, maybe I haven't moved around enough. I'll go sit on the floor and do this team meeting, take the notes." And then I went for a walk with my cousin in the afternoon and was doing the gutter walking,
Yes.
like really trying to get Bub engaged, ready to go because she wasn't. And I got back, we were throwing the ball for the dog, and she went to leave, and I got up and I was like, oh. And my husband was like, your face is different. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, yeah, something like maybe, I don't know, like maybe things are about to start. And then, so didn't really think much of it. We had dinner, and then later that evening, the contractions, like there was without a doubt, they'd
Okay.
started. Like
Yeah.
I was feeling it in my belly at that point, but mostly my pain was in my back because
Damn.
um, she was posterior.
Right. Did
So
you know she was posterior at that
I
point?
don't think I did. Maybe no, actually I did. I did know because I was doing all the spinning babies stuff,
Uh-huh.
like trying to get her to turn
Yeah, yeah.
around. She didn't. um, so the labor had started. So Wednesday night had dinner. Ended up losing that dinner, um,
Oh.
and the contractions went throughout the night. Probably, I'm trying to remember now, had it noted down somewhere, but I don't anymore. I think it was like coming maybe every 15, 20 minutes. Like it
Wow.
wasn't very, like they weren't super strong. It was strong enough to wake me up by Thursday morning, but throughout the night, like I got enough rest,
Mhm.
up every
Okay.
20 minutes. But yeah, so it wasn't like too intense at that point. And then Thursday morning, it was there was decreased movement. So I called the hospital straight away, and was like, "Look, I'm pretty sure my contractions have started." Oh, and before that, I messaged my boss Thursday morning to be like, "Hey, so I'm not going to work today because I'm pretty sure I'm in labor. Going to take a couple of sick days because my maternity leave was set to start the Monday after she was born."
Uh-huh.
So I was like, "Well, I'm not messing around with HR and that. So I'm just going to take a couple of sick days." Um, but FYI, I'm not coming back for 12 months. Um,
Love it.
and so, yeah, so then on Thursday, there was decreased movement. So I was like, okay, call the hospital. They were like, come in, we'll monitor you, which we were there for maybe like an hour or two, strapped into is it the I don't know, the monitor.
CTG.
Baby was healthy.
Yeah.
Heartbeat was good. Was watching the contractions coming or the surges coming.
Yeah.
And then they were like, yep, cool, you're good to go home. Like, we're happy for you to continue laboring at home. Like, you're not regular enough that we would want you to stay.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to stay because I knew, like, if you stay, then there's a bit of like a clock and pressure. And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, nah, I don't need that. And we only live a 12-minute drive from the hospital.
Oh, easy.
So we were like, it's round the corner, like literally, that's fine. And then later Thursday afternoon, my waters broke a little bit.
Okay.
So there was like that little trickle, and I was like, oh, yeah, cool. I know what this is. And then I called the hospital again and let them know. And they're like, okay, cool, come back in. We'd like to monitor again. And we did monitor. And then I think we got home like at 6 p.m. So I'd been like all the way through contractions. Getting in the car and having contractions was the worst. I don't recommend it. Multiple trips back and forth.
Yeah.
And at that point, like, because it was COVID, we were getting our temperature taken each time we were in and out of the hospital. Eventually, like, the person taking the temperature was like, oh, it's you again. And I'm there going, like, I'm proper in labor now. I can't walk when I'm having a contraction. And my husband's like off parking the car, and I'm just standing at the front of the hospital, like, breathing through this. And they're like, so have you been anywhere that you could have contracted COVID? And I'm like, I've literally been in labor since Wednesday. Like, I've been nowhere except here. So went in, got monitored again. They were all happy. They were like, do you want to stay the night? And I'm like, no. So went home again. And so that was in the evening. Things just continued. The contractions started to get closer and more intense. I used water and heat to help me through that. I was in the shower a lot because the pain was all in my back. Like, having the water running over my back was just like perfect.
Yeah.
I couldn't eat. Like, it just, I was sick. Like, if I ate anything, I'd throw up. So probably like had a Vegemite toast throughout the whole kind of 3 days of labor. And then, so Friday morning came around, we're like doing our thing, got the living room all closed up, like creating a bit of a dark cave. Our dog is like by my side, will not leave me. Like, she knew. So I'm in the living room, like on the ball, bouncing, like, come on, kid, let's get this going. And then we get a call at 9 o'clock being like, where are you?
Have a guess.
Like,
have a guess where I am.
Yeah.
Big W.
They're like, no, you were supposed to be here to meet with your OB. And I'm like, well, no one told me that last night. So we like pack the car, like quickly go, not expecting to be the final trip to hospital. But we got there. This is the first time we met with my OB since going into labor, because we were happy with just the midwives at that point.
Yeah.
And we went into a room with her, and she's like, okay, so like, this has obviously been going on since Wednesday night. It's now Friday morning. What do you want to do? Like, do you want us to look at inducing and like getting this show on the road? And I was like, immediately like, no, absolutely not. And she's like, okay, like, that's fine. Just think about how tired you are, and think about being able to, like, when you're at the point of being able to push, like, are you going to have the energy to be able to do that? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. Like, and then she's like, okay, just have a chat with your husband. Like, let me know what you decide. Like, you can go home if you want. And at that point, I was like, no, actually, I am exhausted. I've not eaten. I've not slept. And then I was like, I had to surrender to it and was like, yep, let's do it. Let's have a baby today. And she was like, okay, cool. Like, we'll do a cervix check now that you've decided that. Like, this is the first time anyone's gone anywhere near my cervix. And she's like, oh, yeah, cool. So you're already 8 centimeters dilated. You've done really good.
Wow.
My waters hadn't fully broken. So that was the one bit of medical intervention I had, which was she finished breaking my waters, and then there was the gush.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, I wasn't expecting that. Cool. Um, and then it was okay, like, let's go to the delivery room and see how things progress. And it progressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then baby started to go into D cells with each contraction. And I'm
Uh-huh.
there going, sorry, I'm there going, I'm not having a C-section. No, like that's immediately where my
Yeah,
mind
yeah.
went. And I was like, oh my God, no, this is not happening. But they worked out that it was just with each contraction. So they were happy to just monitor it, which
Mm-hmm.
did mean that I had the monitor on.
Uh-huh.
So there was a little bit less movement
Yeah.
available, but I was still able to move around the room. And I spent most of the delivery room time either on all fours leaning up against the bed or on the ball bouncing, and
Yeah.
constant heat packs being applied to my back and upper thighs. Like
Yeah.
that's where all my pain was.
Yeah.
And then I was like, so I'm not like, what does it feel like when you need to push? Like, I'm like, I don't know, like, what am I supposed to expect?
Uh-huh.
And I said to the midwife, I'm like, I think I need to push. And she's like, yeah, cool. Like, listen to your body and do it.
Yeah.
Um, and before that, sorry, I've had one contraction that was like super intense. And I think that's when she flipped because she
Uh-huh.
didn't come out posterior. So, and I said to the midwife, I'm like, I'm pretty sure we're not posterior anymore. And it was like only a couple of minutes after that I was like, I think I need to push. And so I can't remember really how long I was pushing for, but it didn't feel like a very long time, like maybe max an hour and a half or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then she was born at 2:25 p.m.
Wow.
And it just, yeah. And then they were like, cool. Like we had our time, like she was straight onto my chest. And then, oh, this was the other thing that I was like, hypnobirthing really prepared me for this, was they wanted to give me Syntocin for the
Uh-huh.
placenta. I was like, no, absolutely not. I've
Nope.
just done this awesome thing with nothing. And I was like, can you wait? Like, can you
Mm.
give me an hour?
Yeah.
And they're like, we'll give you half an hour. And I was like,
Right.
okay, well, we'll reassess in half an hour. Meanwhile, like I've got a baby on my chest and I'm like, oh. And I was like, but no, we'll reassess in half an hour. And I was like, unless there's a medical need for it, I don't want this.
Yeah.
And they ended up being like, yeah, okay. And my OB like was still poking around looking. And she's like, you know what? If you just push once, it'll probably come out. And it did. Like, and I didn't know that birthing a placenta was not always easy for everyone. And I was like, oh yeah, like I pushed twice and it was out. And I was like, yeah,
Wow.
cool. Like that was like, how dare you try and give me a needle
Yeah.
or something when that was that easy? Like, why don't you let everybody do this? Um, Now I'm educated that it's not always like that. But yeah, so overall, my one little bit of medical intervention didn't begin a cascade of
Yeah.
interventions, which is what
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't want. And yeah, so yeah, she was born at 2:25 in the afternoon, and we had our like chest to chest time or skin to skin time. Had our first feed, which like we were both clueless, didn't know what we were doing. I'm like, here, like I don't know. And then they were like, okay, so do you want to get up and have a shower? And I'm like, you know what? I'm a little bit woozy. Can I get a Vegemite sandwich? So in the delivery room, they had a Vegemite toast delivered for me
Nice.
because I was like, I've not eaten in 3 days.
Wow.
I need something. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, I got up, went and had a shower in the delivery room, and my husband was doing his skin to skin time. And then when I came out, we weighed her. Oh, and back on that, like so many times, I was told she was going to be a big baby.
Mm-hmm.
And like that was the fear with the gestational diabetes and
Yeah.
everything. She was 2.95 kilos. Um,
Wow. There's
So
nothing, like, she's
nothing
not
big about
huge.
that. No, I had a
No,
lot
she's
of
very normal.
fluid,
Uh-huh.
like a lot of waters.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so she was 2.95 kilos and 48 centimeters in length. So teeny tiny, like little bundle of
Yeah.
joy. And they were like, "Oh, do you feel up to walking up to the maternity ward?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like
Yeah.
let's do it." Like walked up and spent 3 days being brought food every few hours, which was
Yes.
lovely. I actually hated being in hospital
Yeah.
because I don't like being cold. And the
Mm-hmm.
aircon
Mm.
was, it was so cold at night. Like during the day, they left it lovely. And then at night, they like start pumping all this cold air in. And I'm like,
Yeah, they put it on Vancouver setting.
yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to get up and breastfeed in this. Like, and at that point, like, I'm taking all my clothes off so that we get the skin to skin
Yeah.
with each feed. And I'm like, oh my God, my baby's going to freeze. So, like, got her wrapped up, but I'm not wrapped up. And we were getting, like, I was getting out of bed to go sit on a chair to sit with proper posture and everything, and get the midwives to help me and stuff. And yeah, so we did that. Night one was really easy. Set me up for false sense of security because she slept really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
night two, she didn't sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we went through a lot of the colostrum that I had expressed antenatally and didn't know that I should just be giving it to her to get her to sleep and then just express manually to help bring my milk in. And I learnt that after. After.
Mm.
And then night two was horrible. Night three was okay, but I got hit with the tears and
Yeah.
I just cried and cried and cried and like couldn't stop crying. And it was a public holiday, so we didn't get to meet with a lactation consultant. We didn't get the hearing test done. So we knew we had to come back to the hospital on like day 5. So because all the specialists weren't there because they're off
Yeah.
during their public holiday. And yeah, so I struggled with breastfeeding those few nights in hospital and then being home. I think we were home for 2 days before we came back in and got to meet with a lactation consultant.
Yeah.
And that was part of the whole private health package of being
Yeah.
in the private hospital. And she was like, oh, and because she hadn't put on enough weight, like the percentage of her weight that lost was too much.
Yeah.
So they were like, you need to pump and feed every 3 hours. So every 3 hours, we had an alarm set, and I
Yeah.
would wake up and we would do the feed, and then I would pump, and then my husband would have Bob while I was pumping, and then he would top her up with the expressed milk.
Oh,
I would go back to bed and then wake up like an hour later because that was 3
wow.
hours.
Wow.
And then we went into the lactation consultant and she's like, weighed her. She's like, oh, wow, she's gained like nearly 300 grams in 4 days. I'll just call the pediatrician, but I don't think you need to be waking up every 3 hours and pumping anymore.
Uh-huh.
And I was really engorged. Like my boobs were
Uh-huh.
so sore and rock hard. She was like, look, this is your last pump to relieve and then stop.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And she helped me. Like, basically, I just needed to hold her like this, like, just move her over a little bit. And she latched. And our breastfeeding journey from there was amazing. Like, I fed her up until she was 2. When
Wow.
she turned to me one night, and I was pregnant with my second at the time, she turned to me and was like, "Mummy, yuck." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not ready for that." Like, I knew it was coming because the feeds were getting less and less, and like she was only feeding to sleep at night at
Yeah.
that point. And I was like, I'm not ready for this. And I had my silent tear in her room when she was like, yeah, I'm done, basically. And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, I know why this is happening. My milk is changing for bub number 2. But yes, I wasn't ready for that. But we had, like, the lactation consultant was awesome. We had our midwife checkups for 6 weeks postpartum, but I only went in once every fortnight, and that was my choice
Yeah.
because after we got the breastfeeding stuff down pat, I was like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, we're good to go. She slept well, like as well as a newborn sleep. And like, I felt confident in doing it. So I was
Yeah.
like, I don't need to come in every week because it's just painful to get her in the car and go,
Yeah.
like, she didn't like the car. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that to her. Or me.
Yes.
So yeah, like, we just enjoyed our newborn bubble, and because we were in lockdown, there were no visitors
Uh-huh.
at the hospital, and all the midwives were like, babies are thriving because they're not being interrupted for visitors. Like,
Yeah.
mums are thriving because they get to sleep and they get to do the breastfeeding and all uninterrupted. There's no pressure, and we didn't have any visitors. I think we introduced her to my parents and my husband's parents on, I think Mother's Day was the first day that they met her, which is like, she was maybe like 7 days. So about
Mm-hmm.
a week. I mean, we were still in lockdown, but none of them were going to work or anything. So I was
Yeah.
like, you know what, screw it.
Yeah. And you know
Come
your baby
come
anyway.
over, yeah. Before that, because I was just crying nonstop, and I wasn't unhappy or anything. Like, I didn't have postpartum depression or anything. It was just the hormone crash,
Yeah.
and like, I was like, Mum, I can't have you see me like, I can't have anyone be nice to me because I'll cry. I can't have anybody look at me because I'll cry. And then my mum eventually was like, I'm coming over. I don't want to see your baby. I need to see you and know that you're okay because you're my baby. And I was like, oh, Mum. Yeah, okay, you can come over. But I was like, it still brings a tear to my eye. Like, just, and that was something that I really didn't know or know to expect, that crash would be so intense and so emotional. And like, we had friends drop off a roast dinner and they're like, oh, what's going on? And I'm just like sitting out the back in tears.
Oh.
And they're like, yeah, cool, here's the dinner, bye. Which was their plan all along.
Yeah.
And I was like, so, like, I just couldn't stop crying. And that stopped at probably about like 4 or 5 days
Yeah.
postpartum. And then we got another obstacle. Um, so we had for a really boring pregnancy, we had a lot kind of go on all at once in the postpartum period. So we did the heel prick test in the hospital and got a call at like day maybe 6, 5, no,
Uh-huh.
maybe even earlier, but to be like, look, we've picked up on something abnormal. Her TSH levels are abnormally high, and it's because she's got hypothyroidism. So she's got a teeny tiny little bit of thyroid in the back of her throat, but they picked up on that at the heel prick test. And prior to it being included in the heel prick test, you wouldn't pick up on it until they're like 4 or 5 and experiencing development delays. So
Wow.
we went back into the hospital, did another test, came back, and it confirmed that those levels were high. And then we were booked and sent to the Royal Children's Hospital
Mhm.
to do an ultrasound and a CT, or like a scan, a nuclear scan, I think it's called. And so that was the worst day, actually. Like, they'd told me when we booked into the hospital, they're like, don't feed her
Huh?
until you're here so that she'll sleep in the scan.
Okay.
And so, like, I'd obviously fed her in the morning because it was the afternoon. And then, not knowing that, like, she would just feed and sleep anyway. Now, in hindsight, didn't feed her. So she was crying hysterically while we were waiting at the hospital, watching them try and get a cannula into her tiny little, like, 6-day-old hand and try and find a vein was the worst. Like, I'm lying on her, trying to hold her to give her comfort and hold her still. And then I'm crying hysterically. My husband's there patting my back. They eventually got it in. I fed her. She went to sleep. They did the scan, and yeah, it came up that there's tiny little bit of thyroid that just didn't develop. So she now has medication that she takes daily for the rest of her life. And so had monthly blood tests to begin
Wow.
with.
Uh-huh.
They were horrible until they
Yeah.
could start doing them out of her arm. And
Uh-huh.
then now
Wait,
she
were
has
they
them
doing out of her
her
foot?
Yeah, so they just,
Oh,
as a newborn, because they can't find like the veins, they're
yeah.
so little. So they were doing it out of her foot,
Oh,
maybe only for the first few months. And then it changed, yeah, to 3 monthly. We go
yeah.
visit an endocrinologist every 3 months, and
Yeah.
she looks at it and goes, yep, you're good. We adjust it. So,
Hmm.
and it's not something that I knew was like thyroid things are quite common. Like a lot of my
Mm,
friends have thyroid issues, or they don't exist, or they've had them taken out for
yeah.
whatever reason, and are taking thyroxine. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, cool. Like this isn't so bad. Obviously, as a first time mum, like, and then of course I go, oh my god, like, is this something that I did?
Mm,
And the doctor was like, no, no, no. Like
yeah.
this is the best. If you want something wrong with your kid, this is the, like, you don't want something. If there's
Yeah.
going to be something wrong with your kid, this is one of the best things,
Yeah.
because it's easy to fix and
Yeah.
manage throughout their life. So yeah, that was our little birth fun.
That's epic. Like that's just some epic stuff. Like getting your newborn through like a cannula, a blood test,
Yeah,
and a nuclear scan is just like I
full
mean,
on.
it's good that it was picked up that quickly and then
Yeah.
therefore, she could be treated and so on.
Mm,
But it's like, wow,
stressful.
like yeah, I could only imagine like your first time mom, you're trying to
Yeah.
just mom
Yeah.
essentially, right?
Yeah.
And obviously parent, and then you've got to go to those appointments, and you're obviously stressing about what they're going to mean,
Yeah.
and then I could only imagine like 6 day old tiny baby, and obviously she's screaming because like who wants to get their heel pricked
Yeah.
again?
Yeah.
Like, oh
Yep. It
no.
was full on.
Wow, that's epic. But I mean, as you said, at least now it's managed. She takes her medication.
Yeah.
It's all good. You check the levels and so
Yeah.
on.
And
Wow.
she's really good at blood tests
It-
and needles.
wow.
She's really good at them. Like,
That's
don't have to
good.
hold her down or anything anymore. She
Oh
just sits on
wow.
my lap. We practice, like, in the lead up to an appointment. We
Yeah.
play doctors, and
Uh huh.
like it's gonna hurt for a little bit, but then it'll stop and we'll be on our merry way to the park.
Oh, amazing. And see, that's really good when you can, do that practice. It just
Yeah.
so they're prepared, because I
Yeah.
think it's important for toddlers to know what they're going to, walk into, what's going to happen,
Yeah.
just so they know. And it's if they know it's familiar in a sense,
Yeah.
in as much as obviously the pathology is not familiar, but
Yeah.
it's like, okay, mom said, this would happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. And then yeah, feel the sting. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's really good.
Yeah.
So, at what point did you and your husband decide that baby number two, it was time for it, or
Yeah.
for
So
him or her?
this was fun. I always knew I wanted them close in age, because me and
Yeah,
my sisters are all 2 years apart. My
yeah.
husband and his two brothers are all 2 years apart.
Oh, nice.
And we have very nice relationships with our siblings. So
Yeah.
we were tossing this up. We were like, do we do it 2 years or 3 years? And we kept going back and forth for a few months, being like, I don't know. Like, we're going through the pros and cons of both. And like, at one point, it got to, I think she was conceived in October, and we kind of left it to the universe, because I was like, pretty sure I'm ovulating. Let's let the universe decide. And then the day later, we were like, no, let's leave it to 3 years. No, we did
I
it
could.
again.
I was gonna say, did you conceive on the first go?
Yeah.
Love
But,
it.
and it was really funny because we had both been like tossing it up, and then we were
Yeah.
like, we'll leave it to the universe. And then we took that back and we're like, no, we'll wait till 3 years.
No.
And the damage was already done. Um, and then a couple of weeks later, I was like, and I didn't tell him this time. I was
Uh
like,
huh.
yep, something's different.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely different. And I think I'd had to take my first daughter to the doctors, and we had to get a script or something. So we're at the pharmacy, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to buy a pregnancy test and like,
Mm-hmm.
let's just see.
Yeah.
And picked up the stuff, came home, and his parents were over. So I didn't do the test straight away. And then he ended up going out, and I think he went out with my daughter. And so I had the house to myself, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do the test. And then he was doing something out the back, and she came in, and I was like, yeah, it's positive. So I put it in a little Snaplock bag and go, here, go take this to daddy.
Very good.
And he was like, what's this? And I'm like, what do you think? And yep. So that's how I told him we were pregnant with baby number 2.
Wow.
And yeah, so we were both, I mean, obviously we were like, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
We weren't upset or anything that we had decided 3 years and then went 2. And
Wait, you
now,
said October conception.
yeah,
Is that a July baby?
it is.
Ah,
Oh,
no way.
that's right. So that happened because I was like, well, it's now or never. Because I'm not being pregnant over summer, like
Mhm.
heavily pregnant. That's not happening. So
Mhm.
it's now or we wait till 3 years. And so we did it and
Wow.
we got pregnant. um, so yeah, that's that's the way that one went. We have a 13th of July baby.
Nicely done.
Yes.
Wow.
And that wasn't even necessarily planned. I was just like, well, I don't want it to be starting to get too warm. And I don't want it to be too close to my first daughter's birthday either.
Sure.
Because I was like, I don't want a birthday in May and June, and I don't want like another May baby. So
Mhm.
we were like, October it is.
Good.
And then I found out I was still only like 3 weeks pregnant when we found out. Went and did the blood test again, and GP was like, "Yeah, good work." Then, while it was still a secret, I went out to dinner with a couple of friends, and I was not very well this time. Like, I didn't have very much morning sickness with my first, a little bit, but it was more in the afternoon, and it was
Mhm.
just like feeling hungover all the time.
Mm.
But this time it was like pretty all day.
Oh.
And we went out to a restaurant that had like spicy, smelly food, and
Mhm.
I was like not eating much, and they both turn and go, "Are you pregnant?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Only just, but yeah. So that was fun to be able to tell them that. But yeah, so only like 3 or 4 weeks pregnant. And at that point, between number 1 and number 2, I had done a lot of research
Mhm.
in that I wanted to explore a home birth this time.
Mhm.
Because I had learnt that I can trust my body. It knows
Yeah.
what it's doing. I had the confidence. I'd also just had a friend who'd had a home birth. So I reached out to her midwives and the company that did her home birth, and they were like, sorry, we're all booked up for July. And
Damn.
I'm like, how? I'm 4 weeks pregnant. Like, how are you
No
already
way.
booked up for July? And they're like, yeah, we have clients who will book in before they're pregnant because they're planning to get pregnant at that month. And I'm like, that's not fair.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
But so then began the process of trying to find someone who would be able to help me facilitate a home birth.
Yeah.
And I went back to my OB and spoke to her about it. And she was like, look, I can't recommend a home birth. But yeah, she was like, just go find a reputable place that has
Mhm.
insurance and everything. Like, they tick all the boxes that are going to like be safe for you to home birth. Don't go find a cowboy midwife to do it. Like, you
Mhm.
need somebody that you can trust.
Okay.
And so I had interviewed 2 midwives at that point of seeing the OB, and one of them was a said cowboy. And like, we didn't, like, straight off the bat, we didn't vibe. Like,
Yeah.
she was not my style. She was a bit too free for me. And then she was telling me a story about like how one of her mothers was basically bleeding out but refused to go to hospital, and she was like, well, I'm not going to force you. And I'm like, no, at that point I would want you to force me. So I was like, no, we just don't vibe. And then I went to a private midwife group called My Midwives, and they were excellent. My midwife I recommend her to everybody I
Yeah.
know now. And went with her. And my OB actually used to work with the director of My Midwives. So she
Mhm.
was like, okay, anyone hired by her, you can trust, like, because I
Yeah.
trust her. And I was like, okay, cool. And I was still a little bit worried about the gestational diabetes and things going wrong. And at that point, I was like, I don't really want to go to a public hospital purely because I'd never experienced a public hospital. Like, I'd
Mm-hmm.
never, like, I'm a healthy person. Like, I've never had to hospital. And then signed up with my midwives and started doing the appointments and stuff. And our appointments kept getting delayed because of babies being born,
All
which was
right.
fine, like out of their control.
Yeah.
But at one point, I cracked it and was
Yep.
like, no, I need to meet with somebody
Yep.
because, like, I'm like, 100% get that babies being born are out of your control. And yes, you need to go to them first, but I need to be rescheduled sooner so
Yep.
that, because what about my baby?
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, like, I met with multiple midwives because they just wanted me looked after. And their plan and way of care is that you meet multiple of the midwives within the My Midwife group, so
Yep.
that if for whatever reason you have to have somebody other than your primary midwife, it's not a stranger rocking up
Good.
to birth or help you birth your baby.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, like, everything went smooth, and I did the gestational diabetes test at 16 weeks this
Oh,
time.
wow.
Was negative, did it again at whatever the normal is, it 28 weeks?
Yeah,
Yeah,
26
somewhere around
onwards, I
there.
think. Yeah.
Um, did it then, negative again. So I was like, yeah,
Amazing.
cool, easy, like, let's do this. And then I think it was probably would have been around like the 26 to 28 weeks, she was breech,
Oh,
which
wow.
would mean no home birth.
And so, sorry, let's take a little step
Yes,
back.
sorry.
So, when you booked in with your private midwife,
Mm,
you would have been booked into a hospital as well, right? In case
yeah,
of a transfer.
yes,
So, was that going to be, if it had to happen, was it going to be a public hospital transfer? Yes. Oh,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, so but I could go in as a private patient,
Yes.
because I've got the private health insurance. So it mean I could potentially have a room to myself if they're available. So yeah, so sorry, I have jumped well ahead. So yeah, so we had all our appointments with the midwife, and my daughter got to come along to the majority of them, which was good. She got to do the Doppler on my belly, find the heartbeat, and my midwife was just amazing with her, like, got her really involved. And then, so I guess back to why I wanted a home birth as well was because it was COVID times.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of speculation about whether partners would be able to be
Oh,
there
yeah.
while you birth. And I'm like, well, I need him there. Like, I need
Yes,
that.
for obvious reasons. Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, so that was something that I could take into my control if I
Yeah.
controlled the environment. And like, he was on board pretty much
Yeah.
straight away as well for those same reasons, because I'm like, I I really don't understand why a father could be there for like the birth and then get sent out and away
Yeah.
after, because apparently now he can suddenly give everyone
Yeah.
COVID. Like, that didn't make sense to me.
Mm.
And neither to him. And to us, it was really important that he got that bonding time as well. Because to
Yeah.
me, he's just as important as mum.
Yeah. Of
Like,
course.
so I still like, ugh, that anybody missed out on that opportunity because of those policies makes me really angry and fired up. But yeah, so we were both very much, actually, I think he was more on board with a home birth than I was to begin with. Like, because I'm not a very, like, I don't like to take a lot of risks usually.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a home birth felt like a risk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I didn't tell many people that we
Yeah.
were planning a home birth because I didn't want to hear any stories.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hear anything. And I
Yeah.
stopped, even with baby number one, I stopped people telling me stories of
Yeah.
their labor because,
Mm-hmm.
and like, I had the best advice I was given was that's their story.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be yours.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I took that with me. I take that with me now. With for
No, that's right.
anything it applies to.
That's right. And I just wanted to do a little side note because when you're pregnant, I feel like people around you, like your colleagues, your friends, your cousin, whatever, they love to tell you the worst story they've seen, experienced, or heard. And
Yeah.
it's like, why are we always going back to the
Yeah.
worst stories? Like, can
Mhm.
we just either say, wow, good on you, you're pregnant. Oh my God, I hope you have a great labor. Instead
Mm.
of going, oh my God, my cousin bled out on the table.
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
It's all the just you wait. Just you
Yeah.
wait until, because I had
Oh.
always said like I wasn't going to have any pain management
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
anything. And the number of people who are like, oh,
Yeah.
just you wait.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you will cave into that. And
Yeah, you did.
now I'm
Um,
like, yeah, no.
yeah.
Still
And
no, still
also,
wouldn't do it again. Like,
yeah, and you've got, you took the right advice of going, well, it's their story,
yeah,
whatever. And I was the same. I was like, well, I don't know the context. So
yeah,
I'd let people tell me their story because I was like, because I actually wanted to hear their stories because I'm
yeah,
like, oh, this is interesting. Let's unfold this.
yeah,
But I was always like, I don't know the context. So
yeah,
especially because all the stories related to like a friend's friend. So it
yeah,
was like, it wasn't even their stories. So I'm
yeah,
like, well, you don't actually know the full story because you were not, it wasn't you in labor. And,
yeah,
I don't know what
yeah,
happened behind the scenes. So it's like, well,
yeah,
okay, cool.
yeah,
Okay, you told me
exactly.
your story, clap, clap, excellent,
Yeah,
move on. Yeah, if this is you and someone's wanting to tell you their worst story, just say, no thanks, or
yeah,
just go, it's their story. It's out of
yeah.
context anyway. It's probably dramatized anyway because it's like, oh, like
Mm.
I've got a story for
How do you
you.
tell a good story?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
sorry. Coming back to this. So you had friends that had home births, so therefore
mm,
you could obviously talk to them.
yeah,
How was your family's stance on home birth, or your husband's family for that matter?
yeah. So we didn't talk about it much with them.
Mhm.
Like they knew that that's what the plan was,
Okay. Yeah.
but it wasn't brought up
Yeah.
regularly throughout the pregnancy because
Okay.
I just didn't want to invite any
Hmm.
potential of negativity or
Yeah.
doubts. And I think it was mainly the doubts, like the
Yeah.
questions that could be asked that I don't have answers to, like the what if this happens kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen to me.
Yeah.
So, like manifesting it.
Yeah. And a
Um,
lot of those questions. Sorry to interrupt. What if this happens? What if it doesn't happen?
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, then you find, and when you have a private midwife, I just want to put it out there, when you have a private midwife, they have insurance, they're trained as a midwife, they will not leave you to be in danger, whether
Yeah.
it's your health or your baby's health.
Mm,
They will see the flags, they will see what's
mm.
unfolding, they will take action. They will not just watch and go, oh, Kelly's bleeding out. Okay, yeah, no, they will take action. Like,
Yeah.
things will not go sideways if you have a private midwife with you.
Yeah.
You can have a free birth for that matter. Like, I mean, it's totally up to each person to
Mm,
decide. But in your case, you've got a private midwife. Like, she's trained. She knows what she's
yeah.
doing. Like,
Yeah.
and you know your body. Like, if something's wrong, you'll probably know before the
Before.
midwife, and
Yeah.
you'll be able to say, "I feel this."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hello, so it's
Yeah.
really silly, those, oh, what if, well, what if
Yeah.
not, what if it doesn't happen, then
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. So my husband and I both agreed we weren't going to talk about it
Yep.
much. Same with like our due date. I always
Yes.
was like, oh,
Yeah.
sometime in July,
Good.
sometime in May.
Yeah, good.
Like, I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. And that was
Exactly.
something we got from the hypnobirthing course as well, because
Uh-huh.
I was like, I don't want people asking me.
Yeah.
My sisters worked out that I was in labor with my first because they were like, you were very quiet on Instagram and not answering. I think my sister had messaged me and asked me a question, and she's like, you didn't respond. So I just assumed you were probably in labor. But didn't message or ask anything
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
beyond that until we were ready to
Good.
announce it, which is good. But yeah, so we didn't really talk about it much
Yeah.
with anyone other than our midwife and my friend so she had a home birth with her third
Mhm.
child. So she was very experienced by that
Yeah.
point and was full of great advice. And I really appreciated that because she too had two hospital births and
Yeah.
a home birth. So very different experiences. And she had said that her home birth was the best birth experience she
Wow.
had. I can't say that my home birth, like I had a lovely home birth. I
Yeah.
can't say that it was better than my hospital one because I had full control in
Yeah.
my hospital one as well. So I had a
Mm-hmm.
very positive experience through that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the home birth, like we just wanted an environment that we controlled. And it was really exciting, like to get the room ready. So we had moved house and we had have this lovely living space that we were able to close up all the curtains and
Mm-hmm.
had a nice big area that we could set up. So we had it had it water birth. So we had the pool set up. My daughter was able to play in the pool before
Mm-hmm.
um, birth. Actually, sorry, I'm skipping ahead again. We were breech.
Yes, that's right.
That's where we were. We were breech,
Mm.
and that would mean like in their policy, that's no home birth, no go.
Wow.
So I started doing spinning babies. I was lying upside down on the couch on an ironing
Yes.
board twice or three times a day.
Oh.
And then one afternoon, I can't remember how many weeks I was, but I was sleeping on the couch. I think it was during my lunch break because I was working from home. And I felt like a push out on my stomach. And for me, I feel like that's when she flipped.
Wow.
And my midwife was like, yeah, probably. Like the next appointment, she was like, yeah, the head's down.
Oh, amazing.
We were like filling up pie and going, yep, that's a bum. Um, and then she's like, good, get a belly band and wrap your belly up because she ain't flipping back. Um, with my second, she engaged, well, I think she engaged a lot earlier than what my
Mm-hmm.
first did because I was at work and I thought I was like going to work up until labor again.
Mm-hmm.
Silly, naive me. No, I was so tired. So I worked, I think, up until 35 weeks.
Yeah, that's not
36
bad.
weeks maybe because I hadn't planned it. So I had to take some additional leave
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want to leave them in the lurch. So we had to line somebody up to take over my role again. Yeah, so I worked up until 36 weeks. And in my last week, we had an office building move. And so I had to be in the office. And I'm walking in and walking from the train station to the office. And I'm going, yep, there's a child in my pelvis. This is really uncomfortable walking. I'm like waddling along. And so, because we like moved buildings, I thought the walk from the train station to the building was like a 15-minute walk. When I returned to work, I was like, oh no, this is 5 minutes. Like, this is really close. I didn't realize how easy the walk was, but it was because I had a baby in me. And I was like, that's crazy. But yeah, so worked up till 36 weeks this time and then just took the last few weeks to get her nursery ready because it was a dumping ground at that point and that was stressing my husband out and he was like, okay, we need to get this room done. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine, she's going to sleep in our bedroom
Yeah.
anyway. We've got the bassinet, that's all we need.
Yeah.
But he was like, no, it needs to be done.
I love that it's him that needs it done. Like usually it's the mom, right? Like,
Yeah.
and the
And
dad's
I was
like,
like,
yeah, okay,
yeah,
it's
nah,
fine.
it's fine.
That's epic.
But yeah, so we got that done. My daughter was still at daycare and she was only going 2 days a week. So I had Monday, Tuesday to get stuff done. And then the week leading up to going into labor, she was sick, my daughter. So I was sleeping on the couch with her most mornings with Toy Story on repeat. And so I was going to Cairo as well with this pregnancy because she was breech. That was just recommended that that might help Turner, and I enjoyed them, so I kept doing it after. So I was at Cairo, and my pelvis was really sore, and I was just like, I'm in so much pain. Like, this is not comfortable, but it's not labor pain. And that was 2 days before labor started. And I got into a late Cairo appointment, like called them and they were like, yeah, come in, did the adjustment. And then so that was Monday afternoon. Tuesday night, I went into labor and that
That's
started.
epic. That is
Yeah.
epic.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and she was like, yeah, your pelvis is really out of line. So we got it back. And then, so late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, I
Yeah.
woke up and thought, I think, did I dream that? Um, so I thought I dreamt a contraction and it had
Uh-huh.
woken me up. And then I went back to sleep and then another one. And I was like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that was a contraction. And I messaged my midwife who only lived 12 minutes away from me.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like in the next suburb over, which was really handy. And I messaged her. I'm like, oh, I don't really need you yet. Just an FYI, the show's beginning. At that point, so I'd organized for another well, she's a trainee midwife, but also my
Mm-hmm.
friend. And she was coming to be my daughter's support person
Yeah.
because she knows her really well. We met in our mum's group for our first kids. So she's a nurse paramedic who's training to be a midwife. And I was
Wow.
like,
Wow.
mm,
Okay. That's
yeah.
epic.
So she was in the middle of her studies. And at first I was like, oh, is it going to be weird? Like, is this going to make our
Yeah.
friendship weird? And so
I
I
see.
hadn't invited her to be, like, I thought about it, but I hadn't invited her to be part of the process because as training to be a midwife, you follow a certain number of mothers and
Yeah.
go to their births and stuff, and that goes towards your training. And I hadn't initiated that. Like, we started to get closer to birth date, and I was like, actually, yeah, it would be really good if you came along. It counts towards her training, but you're
Yeah.
also there as the support person for my daughter. If
Yeah.
she needs to be removed,
Mm-hmm.
she'll happily go with her. And so I guess that's something that I guess you have to think about who's going to look after the kids if you're going to have a hospital birth. But
Definitely.
I really grappled with the idea of whether I wanted her at the birth or not. And I went back and forth a lot of times. And then I was like, you know what? No, I do want her there if it all feels right.
Yeah.
But at any point that it doesn't,
Yeah.
then she's gone. And
Yeah.
I had two other sets of people lined up. So my parents and another set of friends who she would happily go with
Yeah.
if we needed her out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Good.
we had early Tuesday morning. I'd call, like, message my midwife, message my friend. I'm like, stuff's happening. No, my friend was pregnant as well with her second at that time, and he's an October
Epic.
baby.
Oh, epic.
So she was quite pregnant, and so we've got lovely friends with babies the same age, which is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so message them both, let them know what was going on. I was like, nothing really exciting yet, like it's just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe like half an hour later, I said to my husband, okay, I think we need to call my midwife because every time I stand up, it gets a lot more intense. And like I called her this time and I was like, so like they're still like at least 5 or 6 minutes apart, but they're pretty regular. Except when I stand up, they come a lot closer and like it's a lot more intense. And she's like, okay, lie back down. Do not get off your bed until I get there. So I had like she showed up maybe like half an hour later and I was just lying on the bed and tried the shower trick again to manage the pain, but it didn't. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't help at all because all of it was in my front this time,
Uh-huh.
which so lying and being on all fours was way more comfortable and holding a heat pack on my stomach managed the pain that time. And so I had my primary midwife, you have a backup midwife,
Yeah.
and then I had my friend there, and obviously my husband.
Yeah.
And they were busying themselves, setting up the pool, filling up the pool with water. We had the lounge room like with fairy lights, and I had an affirmations everywhere. I'd
Yeah.
actually found an affirmation coloring in book.
Oh,
So I was
cool.
coloring them in throughout my pregnancy and then had them up all over the walls. And then it was a really quick labor. And so I was really worried. Like, I'm like, how am I going to do 3 days of labor again? How am I going to, I've got a 2 and a bit-year-old. I can't do 3 days out of action.
You'd do it if you had to.
Yeah.
You'd
But
do it, you know.
But like, so it was about probably 2 a.m. when I got the midwife there,
Mm-hmm.
and then things were progressing nicely. We were like, okay, it's time to come out and hop in the pool.
Okay,
I
let's
was,
pause here.
yep.
Did you have any problem with the pool? Because I love those stories where, like the hose fitting didn't fit, or there was
Oh,
not enough water, or the liner wasn't in,
yeah,
or, like epic stories there. So you had no
yeah.
issues.
No, so my husband
Wow.
had to gaffer tape the hose to the tap. And then
Yes.
afterwards, my midwife was like, "Oh, did I not tell you that there's a fitting you can get that just like puts it on?" And I'm like, "No." So we'd gone out and bought like the food grade hose,
Yeah.
and and he's like, "I don't know how I'm going to attach this to the tap," but so yeah, he gaffer taped it to the the tap, and it
Yeah.
ran from the kitchen into the lounge room,
Yeah.
which is now the playroom. And yeah, so no epic
Yeah.
water explosions or anything like that. But yeah, we had the pool set up because I had previous, like 2 days prior, had thought I was going into labor
Yeah.
while I was out at the shops, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was just like a pre-warning, I reckon.
Good.
Yeah.
It's good to get those.
Yeah, and then yeah, so things were progressing nicely. Went and hopped in the pool. The midwives, so two midwives there, and my friend, that everyone was kind of just letting me be in my zone.
Yeah.
I was very kind of like very much in my zone, not really taking note of anything or anyone. They'd randomly check every now and then with the Doppler, and then the time came to start pushing, and I reckon that was around 6:30 a.m., which is right about the time my daughter usually wakes up. So my friend went in and woke her up, got her in her togs so
Yeah.
that she could come out, and was there for the pushing. And so this is the cutest thing. She comes out, I'm making all the noises and stuff, and she wasn't scared or anything, like,
Mm-hmm.
but she's there and she started pushing, and everyone's like, "Oh, are you doing a poo?" And she's like, "No, I push like mum." And I'm like, "Oh my god, so cute." And she was there, she's holding my hand, like patting my hand on the side of the pool. She really wanted to get in the pool, and I was like, "Hell no." Like, no, I need this space, and I don't want to have to worry about you drowning. I know there's other people watching, but like that would just be
Yeah.
like you'd be conscious of it, that she's
Yeah.
in the
Of
pool
course.
and water. Yeah, so started pushing, and then so I don't think we pushed for very long. I can't really remember, but I'd flipped over, like I was on all fours, and then we were like, okay, that's not really going anywhere. So I flipped over onto my back, and I was basically floating in the water. My husband was holding me up, which no one actually realized I was floating until we go back and look at the photos and videos later, and like, how is that comfortable? No, it just was. But it was really cool. We got some videos and you can like see the contraction. And then, yeah, was really different pushing experience. I found like it was a lot more gentle, and like a lot more time was kind of taken to kind of stretch and
Mm-hmm.
like just allow your body to do it. Whereas I think in the hospital, it was a bit more like, okay, now push
Yeah.
and push, 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 and stop. And
Yeah.
like there wasn't that like just listen to your body, like you can
Yeah.
do it. You're
Yeah.
just stretch, like allow yourself to relax, kind of thing, which is definitely a better experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, she was born. So she was born at 7:59 a.m. So 6:30 a.m. I started pushing ish,
Yeah.
and born at 7:59. So only a
Oh.
couple of hours, and then she was born with the membrane intact. Yeah. So there's a video of that being taken off from around her, which is really cool.
Oh my god, can you tag me in it? Like,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're comfortable, I'd
Yeah,
love to
yeah.
see it. This is amazing. She was born
Yeah.
en cool in the
Yeah.
sack.
Yeah.
So what did you do? Did you burst it?
Yeah, my midwife just
Peeled
moved
it
it.
off?
Yeah, peeled it off. Because I didn't, I like for both birds, I was offered to like pick them up and take them
Yeah.
out, but I couldn't. I was just
Yeah.
like, no, I can't. What if I
Yeah.
drop them? Like I'm still full on like adrenaline going here. So I think my husband handed her to me and put her on my chest. And that point, my daughter got in the pool. My
Yeah.
husband was already in the pool with me, and we had a lovely like moment,
Yeah.
just like, and that was the other big difference, is after was really slow. Like
Yeah.
there was no, okay, now we need to get you out of the pool, and now we need to birth the placenta, and this. Like it was just, okay, like take your time.
Yeah.
And then when I was ready, I hopped out of the pool and hopped onto our living room couch
Yeah.
and had obviously everything down to protect it. And that's where I birthed the placenta.
Amazing.
And my daughter was like right up in my legs and watching it come out. And she was fascinated. Like my midwife was there, like talking her through it. And I think she probably won't ever consciously remember
Yeah.
it, but I hope that when we go back and look at the photos and videos and stuff, that gets to have a really positive impact on her
Yeah.
birth experience if ever she decides she wants to become a mum and
Yeah.
be pregnant. So I hope that I can like have that positive impact on her and her story, because like going back, it's always negative stuff that you hear.
That's
So
true.
anybody who will listen to me, I will tell like
Yeah.
I enjoy labor, and people look at me like I'm mad. But I'm like, because it was so different for both children,
Yeah.
and the setting was so different. So I think like that's really valuable to be like, well, you can have a
Yeah.
very positive experience in a hospital. I feel like sometimes on social media you don't get like it's all, and maybe it's just the accounts that I follow, but it's very much like, oh, if you go to hospital, you're not going to be in control.
Yeah.
Like you'll just get swept away within the
Mhm.
policies and system. And
Mhm.
100% that will happen if
Yeah.
you don't know how to be like, well, no,
Exactly.
this is not what I want.
Exactly.
And know that you're able to say that. That's probably not something that I knew I was able to say until
Yeah.
going through pregnancy. But yeah, so we had beautiful birth. So she was born on my dad's birthday, so it was his 60th.
Oh,
We were
special.
supposed to go out to lunch with him if I wasn't having a baby.
Mhm.
So we called him and we're like, "Happy birthday! Won't be able to make it to lunch because yeah, look, we have a baby." So yeah, like that was pretty cool to be able to tell them that way. And both my sisters live in Sydney, so we sent them a message and called them and let them know. And
Oh.
then my husband's parents as well. And we were 2 hours later sitting on the couch watching Toy Story with a baby and our toddler.
Oh, it's
And
amazing.
it was such a surreal experience. I actually took longer to be able to talk about it
Mhm.
to anybody, like to be able to tell the story a lot longer than it took with my first. Maybe because it was so fast the second time.
Yeah.
Whereas the first time, like I had a few days to mentally prepare that I'm going to have a
Yeah.
baby soon. But yeah, so it took me a while to like be able to talk about it because it was just such a magical like us
Yeah.
time, and I loved it. The only downside of having a home birth is the next day I felt great and was like, okay, back to normal, because I was at home. And then
Mhm.
I was like, oh, yeah, no, you've just had a kid. Like, you need to rest. So after that, I rested enough. And then we had some fun 6 weeks postpartum.
Mm.
So my appendix gave up on life. Yep.
Damn.
Yeah. And in hindsight, my body was giving me signals that
Oh.
something was going
Uh-huh.
on, but I
Uh-huh.
just put it down to postpartum aches
Mhm.
and pains when I would like be in the shower and I would sit my shampoo and pump it like on my stomach, resting it there. I'd be like, that hurts a little bit. Oh, but you just had a baby 2 weeks ago. Like, that's
Mhm.
why. And then, like, I was doing my postpartum exercises. And so, at like 2 weeks postpartum, I did some exercises. And I was like, oh, like that feels full on, like for my
Mm.
core.
Mhm.
But I've just had a baby. So, of course. And then so we hit this. I went to my 6 week last checkup, birth debrief, everything on the Monday. And on the Wednesday was the first day that I took both girls to Gym Bubs, which is like free for all gymnastics for toddlers.
Yeah.
And so I was wearing baby number two and like playing with my firstborn and like throwing her around and playing, and I come home and I'm like, oh, my core is sore, but I've probably just overdone it. No. So Thursday was our anniversary. We went to go have lunch, and I said to my husband, I can't eat. Like, I don't feel well. But I think it's just my core. Like, I've just overdone it. idiot, right? I've just overdone it. Like, I'll just come home and rest. And bub number two was really good at sleeping on me. So we just like slept on the couch together. And then Friday rolled around, and our house is really cold. Like, it's
Mhm.
just not designed for winter. And so I was so used to being cold in this house. And I was having a nap. My husband comes in and he's like, "It's like 25 degrees in here. Do you want me to turn a fan on?" And I'm like shivering under the blankets. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure you got a fever. Maybe you should call someone, like the midwife, see if it's like a postpartum complication." So I called them, and my midwife was off on a volunteer program in Africa. So
Damn.
she was midwifing over there.
Mhm.
And so I spoke with whoever was available, and I was like, "Look, this is what I'm feeling. My stomach's a bit sore. I'm not bleeding. Like, I hadn't felt like I was unwell
Mhm.
until that Friday." And
Yeah.
they're like, "Probs, go to the GP." So I call the GP, tell them the story. I'm like, "I'm 6 weeks postpartum." "Okay, yep, let's get you in." This doctor was just about to leave. She's like, "Okay, let's feel your tummy." Yeah. Oh, my heart rate was 120 resting.
Damn.
And
That's a
she's
lot.
like, that's, I'm like, "Yeah, that's not normal. It's usually sits like around 60." Um, and she's like, "Yeah, so you're fighting something." And she like feels my stomach. I'm like, "Ow, that hurts." And she's like, "Yeah, so you're gonna have to go to hospital now. I think your appendix is going." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, 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 great." Immediately, I'm like, "Okay, who's gonna look after the girls?" So my
Yeah.
husband was here. My eldest was having a nap, and he was looking after the youngest, and mum had been over that morning because I was not in a state to be looking after my toddler.
Mhm.
And so I call her on my way home from the doctors. I'm like, "So I'm going to need you and dad to come over. I need to go to hospital, and I need you to drive me there so that Jaden can stay with my eldest, so that she's not waking up into this like chaos with people who, because she was having a nap, who like weren't there, and then dad's and mum are suddenly gone." Because I was like, "No, you can't have that." And so I packed a bag, not really knowing what to expect. Had a letter from the GP being like, "Suspected appendicitis." Packed a bag. First thing I packed was my breast pump, because I
Okay.
was like,
Yes.
"There's no way in hell I'm losing this supply if
Good
I'm going to
point.
have to stay in hospital." And so I had the nappy bag. I brought my 6 week old with me to the hospital. And then, having not hospitaled, like, I was like, I've never been sick enough to have to go to the hospital in an emergency situation,
Yeah.
that I was like faced with, like, "Do you want to go private or public?" And
Uh-huh.
I don't, like, I'm like, "Mum, what do I do?" And she's like, "Well, let's just go talk to the private." And they're like, "If you're not admitted, it's going to cost you $550." And I'm like, that point, I'm like, "I'm on maternity leave. I'm on half pay. Like, can we afford $550 if I'm
Mm.
not admitted?" And then the alternative was like, go public, but probably have to wait and be surrounded by more people. And I was like, "Okay, I've got my 6 week old with me. There's still
Mm.
COVID about, and like, it's
Mm.
still a thing." So I was like, "Let's go private." We were in and seen really quickly, had our own little private cubicle, and they like put the drip in. We're like, "Okay, off to CT. Let's see what's going on." "Yeah, your appendix is really close to like exploding." And they were like, "But we're not set up to have a baby stay here. They don't have
Oh.
cots and stuff." And I like burst. I was obviously emotional and in tears when they were
Yeah.
like, "Your baby can't stay." And I'm like, "She's 6 weeks old." This is not how I imagined my first night away from either girl, because I'd
Yeah.
never been away from my eldest either. And I was like, "What do I do? How do I make this decision?" So I was messaging my friend, the midwife, um, who's also a nurse and knows the hospital system. And I was
Mhm.
like, "Do I get myself transferred to another hospital?" And she's like, "No, don't do that, because they'll transfer you at like midnight when it's not super busy, and that will just interrupt everything." So I ended up being admitted, and my daughter, thankfully, I have an abundant supply of milk. So I had a freezer stash that got her through the night, and she was able to take a bottle. It makes me so grateful to have a village of friends who were able to kind of step in and act immediately. So I had a friend drop off newborn bottle teats because I was like, I'm just going to breastfeed. Like, I'm not going to need bottles. And then, like, my parents would, so I was in hospital for 4 days, and my parents would bring the 6-week-old up each day, and I would feed, and they would stay with me all day, and then she'd come home and I would pump as well, so that my husband had a supply to give her overnight. So that was, I had this lovely home birth.
Wow.
Away from the hospital, away from anything. And then the universe was like, nah, you need to rest for 4 days and be in hospital. And the surgeon was like, yeah, that's one of the worst appendixes I've seen for considering, like, you, because I was like, so this was Friday. I was like, oh, I told him, I'm like, oh, I was just going to leave it till Tuesday when I went and saw the physio, because I had my postpartum physio check. And, like, I just thought it was, like, ab separation or something. I don't know. And he's like, yeah, no, it would have exploded by then, like, fully ruptured. He's like, I can't believe that you, like, were not in, like, so much pain that you weren't able to function, that it would highlight to you that something was seriously wrong. And I was like, yeah, I had no idea. Like, apparently I have a high pain threshold.
That's epic, but, like, I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from. Like, you're just like, well, I don't know, I'm 6 weeks postpartum, you know, you've got 2 girls now. Obviously, it's different to the first time because you've got 2.
Exactly.
So you're like, well, I don't know, maybe it's normal,
Yeah.
you know, who knows, right? And as if you'd anticipate and you'd think, oh, that could be my appendix. Like, as if you'd think that, right? Like, that doesn't happen. Like,
I was just like, yeah, cool. Look, that's happened. And
gosh,
then
you had so much insight to go, I'll take my breast pump, because that was the one of the questions I was going to ask you was, were you able to continue to keep your supply, you know, because obviously if you don't feed, if there's no demand, there's no supply. So,
and that makes me so grateful that I know that it's a supply and demand relationship. That's probably something that I didn't know to begin with. And I tell it to anyone who's becoming a mum now. I'm like, just, like, you got to power through if you can. Obviously, mum's mental health and stuff is very important. But
of course,
when you start supplementing, you are hurting that potential supply because the demand isn't there. And not knowing that, like, you just go, yeah, well, that's what the professionals have told me, the experts. And that was one thing that I found, like, in hospital as well, was that all the nurses were like, oh, so you're going to pump and dump. And I'm like, no, like, this milk is going home to feed my baby. And they're like, oh, but, like, the antibiotics. And I'm like, well, I have researched this high and low in the, like, 2 or 3 hours that I've been here, that I was like, I spoke to the anesthesiologist and he was like, no, it's fine. And then I had like, straight away, I was on to the Australian Breastfeeding Association, reading up everything I could. I was messaging the midwife that had helped me, that had been like, go talk to the GP, and got confirmation from her that it would be fine. And then also my friend. And I was like, I was empowered to be like to the nurses, no, it's not necessary for me to pump and dump. Like, this milk can be kept. It's not going to harm Barb. Yeah, she gets the antibiotics and that's not ideal, but I've already got a probiotic, like, being purchased by my husband. So, like, we're covering all the bases. And then, like, I just pumped, and, like, the nurses were like, damn, like, good work. And on the night that I was admitted, one of the nurses, because I was like, what if she doesn't take a bottle? Like, we've never, like, why would we try? I'm always there. And the nurse was like, yep, it's policy not to have babies stay, but it's life and death if they're not going to eat from a bottle or drink from the bottle. So you make a big song and dance, and they'll let you keep your baby with you. It ended up being the best thing that she did go home at night and I got to sleep and I recovered. But hands down, I don't know how C-section mums do it. Like, I had 3 tiny little incisions and I was in so much pain and I was like, "Oh my goodness, how do you do this?" And then like I was just like, "Oh my goodness, anybody who says a C-section is the easy way out, no.
Mm-mm-mm. No,
No
no.
way." After having like the appendix experience, I now have, and not even a full appreciation for what anybody who has a C-section goes through, but like full appreciation for the pain that comes with that compared to a vaginal delivery where
Yeah.
like I was up and walking and like fine the next day. Like, oh, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, I've had a guest come on, and she had a C-section actually. It wasn't planned, and so she's recovering from this, and her baby's crying, and obviously the baby's got to be in the bassinet,
Yeah.
away from the bed and so on, right? And basically, she's buzzing to get help so that the baby can
Yeah.
be brought to her because she's in so much pain. Her abs have been cut. She's
Yeah.
having trouble getting up.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And she's told by the nurse that, oh, by now you should be able to get up on your own.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, how can you be spoken like that?
Yeah.
Because you've had major abdominal
Major
surgery.
Yeah.
You've had your abs, which help you to get up, which
Yeah.
help you to feel stable,
Yeah.
cut. So they're obviously recovering because it's been like 12 hours since you've had that surgery.
Yeah.
And you're told, oh, you should be able to get up.
Yeah.
The guilt trip that she
Yeah.
went on, because it's like, oh yes, well the nurse knows better. I should be able to.
Yeah.
No,
No.
it's
Yeah.
fine if like obviously
Yeah.
you will be in pain. You will have trouble to get up, and you should get help. Makes sense. Like, oh,
Yeah.
like just the language being used, I was just like, it was infuriating to hear that. Like, of course
Yeah.
it's difficult.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like when you look at it is major surgery.
Mm,
Like major.
yes.
But you're expected to then
Function.
mum.
Yeah.
You're expected to mum and be able to move and care and
Yeah.
see to your child. But if you had surgery on, say, like your ankle or something, you
Yeah.
would be expected to take it easy, keep it elevated,
Yeah.
go to physio weekly
Yeah.
or daily even, and like have all this care
Yeah.
and check. Whereas like mums get the 6-week checkup. And I don't know like if it's more often with if you've had a C-section, but like
I don't think
at
so.
6 weeks it's done.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's
crazy.
The health system when it comes to postpartum is terrible, to put it nicely, because
Yeah.
if you don't have a known midwife and you don't have continuity of care in your postpartum, it's you leave the hospital, you don't see anyone until 6 weeks, where you see your GP who potentially doesn't even know like how you birth, like until you tell them, and they don't really know you, and like they were not there in the delivery room, they were not there days after. And so it's kind of like, oh, okay, you've got some aches, oh, I'll just give you a referral for this, but you've waited 6 weeks for that help potentially. Like it's just crazy how much
Especially
help you don't get.
Especially when you think about how often you visit, like have checkups and stuff antenatally, like all those appointments for those 40 odd weeks or whatever. Like, and then afterwards it's okay, 6 weeks, you should be good to go.
Yeah, that's it. It's absolutely terrible. There's so much to talk about there, but like we don't have time for this. But no, it's absolutely terrible, and it should be different, but it's not. And yeah. Anyway, wow. So you got a hospital experience.
I did.
There you go.
That I didn't want.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Wow. And so then how was coming home after that? Like, were you able to mum-ish?
Yeah. So mumming was like we prepped my toddler.
Yeah.
So while I was in hospital, I was like, okay, what do I need? I need undies that aren't going to sit on my incision. Because for this pregnancy, I didn't want anything touching my belly. Whereas for my first one, it was all high-waisted stuff. So like I need to get some high-waisted and buy a doctor's kit, like a toy doctor's kit. And that's how we're going to prep my toddler to be gentle with mummy, because she needs to take care of me. She's the doctor. And that worked really well. So she was really good, and probably like it was blessing in disguise. She had a really nice bond with my husband in that obviously in the postpartum period, he was like taking her out for fun activities and stuff as well.
Yeah.
Well, I was with bub number 2,
Mm.
but also because I was away, like she bonded to him and my parents
Yeah.
a lot. So it ended like also it all ended well. I've had no complications or anything since. I don't
Yeah.
miss my appendix. But
Good.
I mean, in the ideal world, I wouldn't have had that happen, but
Yeah.
it did, and it was just when I came back, it was very much like doing the skin to skin and kind of, I guess, trying to make up for that time that I was away. And it was only
Yeah.
4 days, but sometimes I feel like my second is quite like clingy to me when I'm there.
Yeah.
Like she's fine if I'm not. And like sometimes I wonder, like, oh, is that
Hmm.
because like unconsciously she knows that I was gone for 4 days and like
Yeah.
she just wants to keep track of me now? Yeah, but that's a whole nother thing.
Wow, that's absolutely epic. Like,
Yeah. So for
what
2
a
boring pregnancies, I had pretty fun postpartums.
wow. Well, I mean, nothing's boring about
Mm.
pregnancy, but it's like,
Straight,
wow,
yeah.
it's really like, so you had 2 really different like birthing experience and you
Yeah.
know, like care throughout
Yeah.
your pregnancy and so on. And yeah, and then really interesting postpartums with very, you know, exciting events, let's say,
Yes.
happening. And yeah, now you rose to the challenges. You
Mm.
were like, okay, well, you don't really have a choice anyway, so
Yeah. Gotta
let's
just do, yeah.
let's organize it. And as you said, you
Yeah.
know, it takes a village. It takes your parents, your friends,
Yeah.
people to just like step up and go, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that,
Yeah.
so that you don't have to worry about it and you
Yeah.
can actually get the care you need.
Mm.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you've got that. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. It made me really appreciate that we've got that.
Yeah.
And then now, anytime anybody needs anything, I'm like, just let me know if I can help.
Yeah.
Like, no pressure, but like lean on us, because I've got friends who are pregnant with twins, and I'm like,
Wow.
let us know if we can help, please.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
twins would be challenging.
it's another
Double the
one.
challenge, maybe. But wow, I think we'll finish on this. But thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing your incredible births. It's been amazing to hear that, and so very funny at the same time. The way you've put it all is just epic. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you very much for having me. I love being able to spread the positive.
Yes, we need more
Mm.
positiveness, you know, because yes, you can have a positive hospital birth and you can have a positive home birth, and yeah, everything in between.
Yeah.
Of course. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to get notified of when a new episode comes out, please subscribe to this show on your podcast listening platform. Also, I would really appreciate it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcast or share this episode so that other moms can find it. If you would like to tell your own pregnancy, birth, or parenting story, please head to the show notes and you will find a form there to get in touch with me. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will be with you again next week for a new episode.